You know that feeling, right? The one where you're about to speak in public and you get that shiver down your spine? It's supposed to be like the number one fear everyone has.
Yeah, supposedly it tops the list of all our greatest fears.
But I don't know. Sometimes the usual advice about it all just feels like it misses the point somehow.
Definitely.
And that's kind of what we're looking at today. You're joining us for a deep dive into this fascinating personal account.
Okay.
This person went through a FranklinCovey presentation advantage course and came out of it with some really surprising observations.
Let's get into it.
All right, so this author starts by setting the scene.
All right.
We're in a room full of people who are taking this presentation course. And it's not exactly a group of excited, super motivated learners.
Yeah, you don't often find that in those mandatory workplace trainings.
Right. There are people who are there because they were told to be there.
Oh, for sure.
At least one person who ended up there accidentally.
Whoops.
And then a few who are really genuinely hoping this is going to be the thing that makes them a star presenter.
Okay.
So that the very realistic picture.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like they're trying to sell you on the course just from the beginning.
Yeah, not the usual like glowing testimonials you might see for this kind of thing.
Right, exactly.
And what really grabbed me from the start is the author's main point, which they make very clear right up front. This course isn't a magic solution. It won't instantly transform you from someone who's nervous about presenting into a total pro.
So it's not one of those anyone can be a rock star deals.
Not at all. And the course makes these really bold promises
Yeah.
about guaranteed success if you follow their method, and the author is immediately skeptical of those claims.
Understandably so. I mean, how many times have we seen training programs overpromise and underdeliver?
Oh, all the time. And then the author dives into this case study that the course uses.
All right.
It's a story about a woman named Anna.
Yeah.
She's a division manager,
Okay.
and she's trying to convince the executive team, which the author refers to as the suits throughout the notes,
Okay, the suits. Got it.
to upgrade their old tech system.
Okay, classic scenario.
Right. And so Anna delivers her proposal,
All right.
and it's technically sound, but it falls completely flat with her boss and her colleagues.
So what happened?
Well, the author sees this as the course implying that presentation style and following their specific format is more important than the substance of Anna's message.
Interesting.
It's like there's you have to be a performer first and an expert second.
Yeah, that doesn't seem quite right.
The author even implies that the company, according to the course's narrative, would rather risk sticking with a potentially damaging old system
Oh, wow.
than have someone deliver an imperfect presentation to the higher-ups.
Ouch. That's a pretty harsh judgment.
Yeah, talk about a skewed sense of priorities.
Real.
But here's where the story gets interesting. Anna then has a meeting with the suits.
Uh-huh.
And despite her presentation being described as, and I love this phrase, Jabberwocky word salad.
Jabberwocky word salad. That's hilarious.
I know, right? It paints such a vivid picture.
It does.
But despite that, the executives actually listen patiently to Anna's arguments.
Huh. So they're not put off by the presentation style.
It seems not,
Yeah.
which is really interesting when you contrast it with the earlier reaction from her boss and colleagues.
Yeah, that's a pretty stark difference.
Right. And the author interprets this as potentially meaning that the senior leadership actually prioritizes the core message more than middle management does.
Okay.
They're more concerned with what is being said than how it's being said.
Interesting. So the suits, in this case, are more focused on the substance.
It seems that way.
Yeah.
And middle management might be more concerned with appearances.
Yeah. Worrying about looking good and all that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about how different levels within an organization might value different aspects of communication.
That's a great point. It's not one size fits all.
Definitely. And so the author felt like the original Anna story sent the wrong message.
Yep.
So they decided to rewrite it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. In their version, Anna's boss is a mentor,
Okay.
and he helps her refine her message based on its merits.
So he's focusing on the content itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And ultimately, he gives her the opportunity to present to the suits.
I like this version better already.
Right. It completely shifts the focus.
Yeah, instead of putting all the pressure on Anna to be a perfect presenter,
Yeah.
it shows that her boss and the company are invested in her development.
Right.
And that they value the business need itself
Exactly.
more than just surface-level presentation skills.
It's about fostering a culture where people feel supported in developing their skills without being terrified of not being a perfect performer.
That's such an important point because fear can really hold people back.
It absolutely can.
Yeah.
And now this is where things get really interesting.
Okay, lay it on me.
So the author has to give a presentation as part of this course,
Mm.
and they decide to make the course itself the topic of their presentation.
Oh, wow, that's bold.
Talk about meta, right?
I wonder how that went down.
Well, according to the notes, the instructor had some very confused looks
I bet.
and immediately pulled the author aside for a sidebar conversation.
I can just imagine that conversation.
Yeah, it must have been awkward.
So the instructor was not expecting a critique of the course itself.
Not at all. And then the instructor made this comment about FranklinCovey having fancy materials,
Fancy.
which the author interprets as meaning expensive,
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
like all those elaborate workbooks and flashcards.
Right.
And this really highlights the commercial aspect of these training programs.
It is a huge industry.
It is.
Yeah.
And the author, being, an economist,
Of course.
starts to question the actual return on investment for this kind of training.
That's a fair question because these programs can be really pricey.
They can. And here's where the irony really kicks in.
Okay, I'm ready for this.
So this course that's all about how to present relies heavily on its own presentation materials,
Okay.
which includes a video featuring our friend Anna again.
Yes, Anne.
And in a crucial moment in the video, the actor playing Anna forgets her line while presenting a key performance metric.
You can't make this stuff up.
I know, right?
I mean, it perfectly undermines the idea that there's a foolproof method to presenting.
Right. And this leads directly into the section of the author's notes titled Nonsense.
Nonsense. Okay, I like where this is going.
This is where they tackle some of that really common but oversimplified advice about body language.
Oh, yeah, like what to do with your hands and all that.
Exactly. Folded arms mean you're defensive.
Right.
Hands behind your back means you're hiding something.
Uh-huh.
Hands in your pockets means you lack confidence.
I've heard all of those.
And then the author gives this wonderfully sarcastic example
Oh, tell me.
about the course suggesting you should always keep your elbows visible.
Your elbows, really?
I know, right? It's like the angle of your elbow is going to make or break your presentation.
Like somehow it's going to negate your data?
Exactly.
That's hilarious.
It is. And it highlights the absurdity of focusing so much on these very superficial physical cues.
Right, because communication is so much more than just how you hold your body.
It is. And this leads to them debunking that statistic that gets thrown around all the time.
The one about communication being like 55% body language, 38% tone of voice, and only 7% words.
That's the one. And the course actually used that statistic.
Oh, wow. They really buy into that.
They do.
Yeah.
But the author argues that the people who really need to understand the information, the suits, in their example,
Okay.
are focused on the substance.
On that 7%.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not just the visual theatrics.
Right. So it's not just about putting on a show.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And then the author points out something really interesting about the Anna video. They noticed that the actor's hesitation when she forgot her line wasn't edited out
Interesting.
or covered up with like a reaction shot.
So they just left it in the video.
They did.
No. So they're assuming the audience isn't really paying attention to the content.
That's what it seems like.
Yeah.
And it's a fascinating observation about a disconnect between what the course is teaching and the execution of their own materials.
Yeah, it's like they're not practicing what they preach.
And speaking of inconsistencies,
Oh, there's more.
there is. The author points out that the course specifically instructs you to only use sans serif fonts in presentations.
Okay, that's a pretty specific rule.
It is. But then in the Anna video, her slides actually transition to serif fonts at one point.
Oh, come on.
I know, right? It's a pretty glaring contradiction.
It makes you wonder if they even noticed.
And then the author starts to ask these really thoughtful questions about who is typically sent to these types of courses and why.
Okay, like who benefits from presentation training?
And they use the example of IT professionals.
Okay.
And they question whether this kind of training is really empowering IT professionals to communicate their expertise.
Or if it's just adding to their anxiety.
Exactly, because if you're already someone who's not comfortable presenting,
Right.
then being told to focus on all these superficial aspects rather than the value of what you're actually saying,
Right.
that can be really counterproductive.
It can make you more self-conscious.
And the authors suggest that this might be a symptom of a low-trust work environment.
Okay, so the focus on presentation is actually a sign of a deeper problem.
That's what they're implying.
That's interesting.
Like the company values the appearance of a polished presentation more than the actual content.
And more than the inherent capabilities of their employees.
Exactly. And to really drive this home, the author uses this analogy of the Wizard of Oz.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So in their version of the story, A politician tried to discredit an opponent
Okay.
by painting him as a wizard figure who's just handing out empty gifts. But it backfires because the opponent's approach is actually about empowering people, which ironically is what the wizard ends up doing for Dorothy and her companions in the end.
Right. He helps them realize they had the power all along.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And the author uses this analogy to highlight that real impact comes from substance.
From the actual help you provide.
And enabling others.
Not just putting on a flashy show.
Right. Substance over style.
I like it.
And then we get this really telling anecdote about two people in the presentation course. One person was in a role that required them to present all the time.
Okay, a seasoned presenter, you think?
You'd think.
Yeah.
But they were surprisingly disorganized
Oh, really?
and relied heavily on their notes.
Huh, interesting.
And then there was another person who wasn't in a presenting role at all,
Okay.
but they were naturally engaging and clearly very knowledgeable.
So even without formal training,
Right. They were a natural.
sometimes it's just innate talent.
And the author uses this to underscore their conclusion
Which is?
that having a presentation advantage often comes down to opportunity, inherent ability, and genuine expertise.
Not necessarily a formula you can learn in a course.
Exactly. So the author's main takeaways from this whole experience are
I'm ready.
the course isn't a magic solution.
Right? No quick fix.
It's potentially not the best value for money.
Especially considering those fancy materials.
Exactly. We need to think more carefully about who gets presentation training and why.
Yeah, who actually needs it?
And ultimately, the message itself is what truly matters.
The substance over style.
And then they have this final humorous takeaway.
Let's hear it.
Remember to keep your elbows out.
Oh, of course. How could we forget?